What if the Marauders took their mischief to the next level? What if the creation of the Marauders map was a complicated combination of charms and potions? Let's explore this magical Harry Potter what if. The castle was dark, most everyone asleep in their bed. The portraits were dozing off, the ghosts had retreated to the dungeons, professors returned to their private chambers. The castle never saw this sort of quiet except for the dead of night. The few people that were awake were in their dormitories, or the few staff members that were charged with walking the halls. And the 4 students that had snuck out of their rooms, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. The 5th years had made quite a name for themselves and were constantly getting in trouble with their teachers. Mischief makers, though fairly excellent students, spent the majority of their school time goofing off and pulling pranks. The 4 were currently cramped under James' invisibility cloak, trying to walk through the school without losing anyone from under the cover. It was difficult to avoid teachers at night, as it was so hard to see down hallways. But with the invisibility cloak, they could find their way around without the worry of getting caught. Or at least it would be far more difficult. They were still solid beings and they still made noise, but being invisible was a huge plus. "What are we doing?" Remus whispered. "Guys, we're going to get caught. We don't all fit under the cloak like this." Peter was the only one who was nervous. "Don't worry so much, there are hardly ever any teachers out this late." Sirius rolled his eyes. Peter was usually the one who tried to back out. "Sirius and I heard another rumor about a secret passage out of the school. We have to check it out and see if it's true," James explained. "We're almost there. We have a test in the morning. Couldn't we do it tomorrow?" "Mooney is busy tomorrow, you git. We have to do it tonight." Sirius smacked his friend's arm. "Where is it?" Remus questioned, ignoring the other 2. "Behind the one-eyed witch statue. If you say the right password, it opens up. And it should take us to Honeyduke's cellar." "So we're going to steal now?" Peter grew even more nervous. "No, of course not." "No, but we don't have to wait for the Hogsmeade weekends to go up there." As the 4 boys rounded the corner, they collided with someone. Somehow, with a tight hold on the cloak from Remus and James, and a fair bit of luck, none of them came out from under the cloak and remained invisible. However, they had knocked the other person to the ground. "Who's there?" Filch scrambled to his feet, frantically looking around to see what he had crashed into. Holding their breath and slowly taking steps backwards, the 4 Gryffindors managed to get into another corridor where they could make their way back to the dorms. "That was close enough. We can try a different night." Peter spoke as soon as they stepped back into the common room. "Peter's right, let's go to bed for the night. We can try again after the moon." After a particularly rough transformation from the full moon, Remus spent the entire next day in the hospital wing. While he was reading through some books that he had borrowed from the library, he found a spell that made him think of a few nights ago when they were nearly caught by Filch. The Homunculus Charm. A charm that, when cast onto a map, would enable it to track every person that was within the mapped area. They may have actually gotten to the secret passageway had they known Filch was around the corner. Though a map of that size seemed ridiculous. The school had 7 floors, plus the dungeons, 4 towers, and the secret passageways. Sirius, however, thought it was a great idea. He immediately began listing rooms and was trying to figure the layout of the school in his head. James took little convincing as well. He was more concerned with someone being able to learn the spell as it wasn't in any of the textbooks. Within a week, what had started as a joking idea became a quest. One that Sirius had become obsessed with. At any point that he wasn't working on his schoolwork, he was working on mapping the Hogwarts classrooms. Sirius and James even took it upon themselves to go through the areas that they were not allowed at night with the invisibility cloak. They were able to discover that the secret passage behind the one-eyed witch statue was real, and they found a storage room under the library that you could only get to from the restricted section. There was a long series of rooms in the dungeons that had nothing in them and led to a dead end. As they discovered the castle more and more, they had to continue to redraw the map. Or when they realized they had missed the charms classroom. And again when they realized that Professor McGonagall had an office both off of her classroom and beside her private room. And again when they found an empty classroom that no one had ever used. While his two best friends worked on perfecting the map itself, Remus tasked himself to learn the homunculus charm. What started out as his own idiotic idea, James and Sirius had started to put their whole heart into finishing the map. He felt the least he could do was to learn the spell that would help them finish it. He used scraps of discarded maps from Sirius and James to practice. Parchment with only a single room on it, so he knew that the map would be accurate. He found every book he could in the library that would help him accomplish the spell. After weeks of practicing, while the four friends were in the common room long after everyone else had gone to bed, Remus finally mastered the spell. He nearly jumped out of his seat as he stared at the drawn map that had moving dots dance across it. He had done it. The triumph lasted a moment when Peter piped in that they would have the map taken from them as soon as a teacher would be able to see what it was. This launched Remus on another project of figuring how to reveal the ink and hide it away at will. There were the obvious spells. Illegibilus would hide the map away, and Aparecium could reveal invisible text. But any professor in the school would be able to use those spells and easily find what was written on the parchment. They would need a way to change the words used, similar to how the fat lady requested a password before opening the door. Remus spent weeks trying to perfect the spells that would allow them to hide and reveal the map. But he couldn't figure out how he would be able to change the words that would enact the charms. James and Sirius finally finished the map. Each room was drawn perfectly and to scale. They had explored every inch of the castle, tried every door, and looked for more secret entrances as they went. They were ready to charm the map, but Remus assured them that it wouldn't be a good idea until he figured out how to hide the map. The final piece of the puzzle came to James while they sat through a rather boring potions class. Sirius had just finished making the babbling beverage, something that James had mastered a week ago thanks to his father's job as a potions master, and had convinced Peter to test it out. James was so focused on the map that he had barely noticed that Sirius's potion had worked, and now Peter couldn't stop talking. His eyes caught the moving pictures that Professor Slughorn kept on his shelf. All of his top students that he was particularly proud of, but the people in the pictures didn't matter. What was important to James was how they were moving. A moving picture was taken with a camera and then placed in a special potion that would allow it to move, just as a finished portrait would be placed in the solution and bring the portrait to life. James began thinking, if portraits could take on the personality after being brought to life, what if their map could too? Would it even work since a map and a portrait were very different? A map can't talk the way a portrait can. It was a wild theory, one that James had no evidence to suggest that they should try. However, it was the first idea that anyone had come up with. Remus was still trying to just change the words to spells that already existed. He stayed late after class, telling his three friends to head up to lunch without him and that he wouldn't be much longer. He had to ask Professor Slughorn a question. "Ah, Mr. Potter, is there something I can help you with?" "Sorry, Professor, I'll try to keep it quick." After using a developing solution to bring a portrait to life, where do they get their personalities? Does it come from the person that it was based off of or from the person that it was created by? Excellent question. Slughorn was always easily amused by potions-related questions. Thinking of trying out some portrait making? Well, as you know, my dad is a potions master, so he always has this stuff in the house. It is actually neither. The portraits will take on the personality and knowledge of who they spend the most time with. Typically, people will have portraits made of them before they die, so it can take on their personality. The more time you spend with the portrait, the more closely the personality will match. Thank you, Professor. That helps a lot. James quickly left the classroom before the professor could ask any other questions that may cause him to reveal what they were up to. Rushing up to the Great Hall, James quickly shared his idea with the others. He knew it would be a long shot, but if they could run the map through the solution and then spend a bunch of time with it, then maybe they could give it enough of a personality to create a password. Then they would be able to reveal and hide the map at any point in time. Peter was skeptical, because this would involve an even longer process of them breaking the rules to have an object that would help them break the rules. Remus was skeptical, but only because he wasn't sure if the magic would work the way James wanted it to. Sirius was on board immediately, congratulating James on such out-of-the-box thinking. After taking the rest of the day to think through what could go wrong, Remus agreed it was something they should try. There wasn't much that he thought could go wrong. Worst-case scenario, the solution would do nothing because it wasn't a picture. James got to work on creating the developing solution. While the potion brewed, Remus was able to use the homunculus charm. The map was tracking people just as it should. They watched as people came and went from the common room for hours while they waited for the potion to finish. Sirius tested the charms to hide and reveal the ink before they soaked the map into the finished developing solution. It would be another hour before they could remove the paper from the solution, and then it would have to dry completely before they could start the next part of their plan. The plan was that if they repeated the charms to hide and reveal the ink, while at the same time speaking the words they wanted to use as a password, the map would be able to link the two. They spent a couple of days with the map before attempting this, allowing the map to have a chance to get to know their personalities a bit for attempting to seal in a password. The 4 Gryffindors had tucked themselves into a corner of the courtyard, keeping themselves out of obvious view as they were ready to attempt the password. Remus had done one last turn of revealing and then hiding the words. They were just about to attempt the password. James, Sirius, and Peter would speak their made-up password while Remus would recite the charm to reveal the map. "What are you 4 up to?" Professor McGonagall stopped as she saw the boys huddled in the corner of the courtyard. "Professor, we're just working on some classroom for defense against the dark arts." Remus spoke first, knowing that McGonagall would trust his answer the most. "We've got an essay on ghouls due soon." "Professor," Sirius stood, raising his right hand as if speaking a pledge and a goofy smile on his face. "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." As Sirius spoke, Remus watched as the map revealed itself. Luckily, McGonagall was too focused on Sirius to notice the change, as was Peter and James. "That's quite enough, Mr. Black. Get back to your work." The boys waited until the teacher was far enough away before even trying to look at the page. James gave Sirius a rough pat on the shoulder, congratulating him. "Way to go, Padfoot," he cheered. "Mischief managed." Remus watched as the map disappeared again. They did it. Without even realizing it, they had made the map exactly how they had wanted it to work. "Pads, say that again." Remus pulled on his robes, gaining the attention back to the map in front of them. "Say what?" "What you just said to McGonagall." "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Ink began to appear on the parchment again. The map filled in slowly, almost as if it were drawing itself out again, ending with the signature they had written at the top. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs are proud to present the Marauders map. "Prongs, say what you said to Pads." Remus looked to James. "Mischief managed?" James wasn't sure if those were the words he wanted to hear, but it was just as ridiculous as what Sirius had just said. And just like that, the ink disappeared again. "We did it," Remus said first, jumping to his feet. "We did it?" Peter followed. "We did it!" Sirius screamed, gaining the attention from everyone that was in the courtyard. However, when the students looked towards them, all they saw was a blank piece of parchment. That's our theory. Harry Potter's time at Hogwarts has many magical stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what other magic we uncover.